Senators, Baisley,
Absent.
Bridges,
Absent.
Buckner,
Absent.
Coleman, Cutter,
Absent.
Danielson, Danielson,
Excused. She was actually here.
Exum, Fields,
Excused.
Gardner, Janal, Gonzalez, Hanson, Hinrichsen, Jaquez Lewis,
Absent.
Kirkmeyer, Coker,
Absent.
Liston, Lundeen, Lundeen, Marchman,
Absent.
Moreno, Mullica, Pelton B, Pelton R,
Absent.
Priola,
Absent.
Rich, Roberts, Rodriguez, Simpson,
Absent.
Smallwood,
Absent.
Sullivan,
He may have told somebody else.
Van Winkle,
Absent.
Will, Winter, Zenzinger,
Sorry, nobody told me.
Absent.
Bridges,
He said he's here. So,
Will the clerk please mark Senator Simpson as excused?
yes.
Can I- Danielson,
She's going down the list.
Jaquez Lewis, Colker,
Go ahead, keep going, sorry.
Marchman, Pelton R, Priola, Smallwood, Van Winkle, Zenzinger, Colker, Van Winkle, Jaquez Lewis,
So those senators come down first. And then, yeah, so he'll call. Yeah, he'll call the current members, and the current senators, the former senators,
Mr. President,
Here. Morning roll call is 28 present, 5 absent, and 2 excused. We do have a quorum. Members, I just want to say, for the last 87 days, I have been on time at this podium, and I just want to say punctuality is very important to me. So, will the good senator from Colorado Springs, wherever you may be, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join Mr. President and I in saying the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please add Senator Cutter to the roll? Approval of the journal, Senator Cutter. Yep. Senator Cutter, that was really good effort. But let's stand in a senatorial 5 and figure out what's going on with the mics. Will the clerk please add Senator Marchman to the roll? Will the clerk please add Senator Zenzinger to the roll?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. See, it just takes a Republican to come down here and things start working. All right, let me see if the one on the left side is working. Good morning. There we go. Good morning.
It's just that the microphone didn't know that it needed to show up before 9:20.
Yes. Nothing works around here till 9:20.
Check, check, check.
Will, members, we are going to come back together. Will the clerk please add Senator Zenzinger and Senator Fields to the roll? And Senator Marchman, we already added you. All right, let's pick up where we left off. Senator Cutter. Approval of the journal. Senator Cutter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate Journal of Tuesday, April 4th, 2023 be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no? No! The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Senate Services.
April 5th, 2023, correctly printed Senate Bill 266, 267, and 268, correctly engrossed Senate Bill 204, correctly re-engrossed Senate Bill 178 and 232, correctly revised House Bill 1025 and 1039, correctly enrolled Senate Bills 188 and 189.
Committee reports.
April 4, 2023, the Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 209 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation, with a recommendation that it be placed on the consent calendar. April 4, 2023, Mr. President, the Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology has had under consideration and has had a hearing on the following appointments and recommends that the appointments be placed on the consent calendar and confirm member of the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators for a term expiring August 10, 2026. Shirley Thielen of Louisville, Colorado, to serve as a representative of the public at large, appointed. April 4, 2023, Mr. President, the Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology has had under consideration and has had a hearing on the following appointments and recommends that the appointments be placed on the consent calendar and confirm members of the Underground Damage Prevention Safety Commission for a term expiring January 1, 2026. Eric Lewin of Morrison, Colorado, to serve as a representative of municipalities, appointed. April 4, 2023, Mr. President, the Committee on Finance has had under consideration and has had a hearing on the following appointments and recommends that the appointments be placed on the consent calendar. Confirm member of the Advisory Committee to the Property Tax Administrator for a term expiring September 1, 2025. Tyrone Coleman of Alamosa, Colorado, to serve as a non-assessor from the Western Slope, occasioned by the resignation of Azarel Madrigal Chase of Alamosa, Colorado, appointed. April 4, 2023, the Committee on Finance, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 212 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. Senate Bill 208 be referred to the Committee of the Whole, a favorable recommendation with a recommendation that be placed on the consent calendar. House Bill 1186 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1008 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. April 4, 2023, the Committee on Local Government and Housing, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1190 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole, a favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 206 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole, a favorable recommendation. House Bill 1095 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole, a favorable recommendation.
Message from the House.
April 4, 2023, Mr. President, the Speaker has appointed Representatives Mabry, Chairman, Parenti, and Taggart as House conferees on the First Conference Committee on Senate Bill 168.
Will the clerk please add Senator Baisley and Senator Buckner to the roll?
Do we have any other people?
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for consideration of memorials.
The motion is to proceed out of order for the consideration of memorials. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The Senate will now proceed out of order. Consideration of memorials. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Joint Memorial 5?
Senate Joint Memorial 5 by Senator Rich and Representative Soper and Taggart, memorializing former Senator Tillman M. Bishop.
Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of SJM 005 and request that it be read at length.
Senate Joint Memorial 5, Senators Rich and Representatives Soper and Taggart, memorializing former Senator Tillman M. Bishop. Whereas our respected former colleague, Tilly M. Bishop, a past member of the Colorado General Assembly, departed this life on June 16, 2019. And whereas Senator Bishop was born on January 1, 1933 in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to Oliver Frederick Bishop and Lily Mae French, and whereas Senator Bishop earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in education at the University of Northern Colorado, and in 1999 received an honorary doctorate from his alma mater, and whereas in 1962, Senator Bishop and Pat Bishop, his wife of 67 years, moved to Grand Junction, Colorado, where he began working at what was then Mesa Junior College. And whereas in 1970, Senator Bishop ran for and was elected to the State House of Representatives, where he served one term as a representative for House District 50 and one term as a representative for House District 55. And whereas while serving as a state representative, Senator Bishop served as vice chair on the Health, Welfare, and Institutions and Transportation and Highways Committees, and also served on the Appropriations, Labor and Employment Relations, Business Affairs, and House Services Committees. And whereas in 1974, Senator Bishop ran for and was elected to the state Senate, where he served as state senator for Senate District 30 from 1975 to 1982, and Senate District 7 from 1983 to 1998. And whereas while in the Senate, Senator Bishop served as chair of the Transportation, Agricultural, Natural Resources, and Energy, and Legislative Audit Committees, and also served on the Appropriations, Local Government, Business Affairs and Labor, and Legislative Council Committees. And whereas in 1992, while serving in the Senate, Senator Bishop worked with members of both parties to establish, by constitutional amendment, the Great Outdoors Colorado program, which uses lottery funds to protect open spaces in Colorado, and sponsored legislation concerning water, education, higher education, and many other issues important to his Western Slope district. And whereas in total, Senator Bishop served in the General Assembly for 28 years, including 4 years in the House and 24 years in the Senate, during which he spent 6 years as the President pro tem, making him the fourth longest-serving legislator in the state's history. And whereas nationally, Senator Bishop served on the Executive Committee of the National Conference of State Legislatures as Colorado's representative, and also sat on the Executive Committee of the Energy Council. And whereas after his time in the legislature, Senator Bishop served on the University of Colorado Board of Regents, the Colorado Mesa University Board of Trustees, and as a Mesa County Commissioner, and did extensive work with the Grand Junction Lions Club. And whereas Senator Bishop also served with the National Junior College World Series Tournament for many years, the Selection Committee for the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame, and the Aspinall Scholarship Committee. And whereas, in appreciation of Senator Bishop's 38 years of public service, the Western Colorado Community College Bishop Campus and the Tillman Bishop State Wildlife Area were named after him. And whereas Senator Bishop was preceded in death by his son Barry, and his wife Pat passed away in 2021, and whereas Senator Bishop is survived by many friends and former colleagues, and whereas Senator Bishop was a devoted public servant who will be remembered for his hard work, dedication, and accomplishments, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 74th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that in the death of Tilly M. Bishop, the people of the state of Colorado have lost a dedicated public servant and outstanding citizen, and that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, do hereby extend our deep and heartfelt sympathy to the members of his family and pay tribute to a man who served his state well and faithfully.
Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. For those of us from the Western Slope, we fondly remember former Senator Tillman M. Bishop as Tilly Bishop. I knew Senator Bishop for close to 40 years. When I first worked for State Representative Jim Robb in the early 1980s, it seemed like those two were in meetings almost every day, or at least weekly, in Representative Robb's law office. Senator Bishop always impressed upon me the importance of community, and he lived by that example every day. He was a longtime member of the Grand Junction Lions Club and a reliable salesman for them. I always knew when I received a phone call from Senator Bishop every January, it was to purchase Lions Club tickets. He sold more than $50,000 worth of Lions Club Carnival tickets over the years, and he was a Melvin Jones Fellow, the highest award available to the Lions. One of the stories I read in Senator Bishop's obituaries was when he was running for office for the first time. His wife, Pat, drove a Bishop-backing billboard around town in a pickup, and they both knocked on doors from morning to night. He learned along the way to always walk on the sidewalks when approaching a house after a potential voter scolded him for crossing a lawn on the way to the doorstep. Another badly underestimated time was when he accidentally left the gate open as he approached a house, and the family dog escaped. Tilly chased down the canine and returned it to the family home. When he asked the gentleman for his vote, the resident said, "Tilly, you're going about this all wrong. Why don't you run for dog catcher? You did a pretty good job." When I first ran for public office in 2002, Senator Bishop, who was then a Mesa County Commissioner, was quick to join my campaign and endorse me. He was always there to offer his time and expertise along the way. I had the opportunity to visit Senator Bishop at his home shortly before he passed away. He enjoyed hearing about my first year in the state legislature, and he was always there to provide words of encouragement. It is an honor for me to walk in the footsteps of someone like Senator Bishop. Mr. President, two former Mesa County Senators, Ron Tech and Josh Penry, were unable to be here today. They have asked me to read their comments into the record, and with your permission, I would like to do that at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Please proceed, Senator Rhodes.
Senator Ron Tech was the first senator after Senator Bishop left office, and his remarks are as follows. "I'm sorry I can't be in attendance with you today. I know I'm missing some old friends. Tilly and his wife Pat, the unsung heroine of that team, were stalwarts of Mesa County, the Western Slope, and the state of Colorado. Tilly was in the legislature for 28 years, 24 of them as a senator. The passage of term limits forced him to not run again in 1998. If term limits hadn't been put into the Constitution, I know he would have served the state for at least a couple more terms. As it was, he was the fourth longest serving legislator in Colorado, a record that won't be broken. After he left the Senate, he ran for and won a Senate on the University of Colorado Board of Regents. He served one term, then ran for Mesa County Commissioner, where he served a 4-year term. Unfortunately, health issues took their toll on him and pulled him from public service, so he graciously gave for 36 years that I remember. His wife, Pat, was such a strong supporter of Tilly and did community work on her own. Tilly was my predecessor in the Senate and left me with big shoes to fill. His legacy lives on in the Tillman Bishop State Wildlife Area, as well as in the memory of all the good he did for his constituents in Mesa County, the state of Colorado, and beyond. He was instrumental in the junior college baseball tournament held each spring in Grand Junction, and the campus of Western Colorado Community College, a part of Colorado Mesa University, is named after him. Tilly was an old school legislator, known for working across the aisle, recognizing the importance of the work of the legislature to the state of Colorado. Unfortunately, his lifelong companion and wife, Pat, passed away in March of 2021. Knowing Tilly and Pat was an honor and a pleasure. They are missed by those who knew them. Sincerely, Senator Ron Tech. The following is from former Senator Josh Penry. It's an honor to remember the life, the service, and legacy of State Senator Tillman Bishop. Rural Colorado has had many great and dynamic leaders since our statehood in 1876. In this pantheon, in the long hall of history echoing all around us, Tillman M. Bishop's tenure of service stands out. Senator Bishop understood well the duties of his office: to be a voice for rural Colorado, rural people, and rural priorities, to endeavor to make good laws, to give a voice to his district, to respond to constituent mail thoughtfully, to read his bills carefully, to listen and ask smart questions in committee, to seek balance in manner, in word, and in deed. The sublime, to respect the views of the other side of even the most heated debates. And the ceremonial, to write handwritten notes of commendation to his constituents in moments of achievement. Tilly wrote notes prolifically. He knew that a kind word on letterhead adorning the seal of the state of Colorado really meant something to the person receiving it. He knew it would be handed down from one generation to the next. He believed it was the job of a local leader to lift his people up, to celebrate their better angels, and commemorate the finest moments. Tilly rooted for the people he represented. His home team was Grand Junction, Colorado, USA. Tilly was a man of decorum, but he was not a pushover. He had and I'm going to just say BS stamp on his desk that he reserved for the occasionally irreverent piece of constituent correspondence. That was like blocking someone on Twitter back in the day. I never saw him use that stamp, but I don't doubt for a second he did. Senator Bishop didn't have a lot of regard for the bullies or the melodrama actors who have been known to get drawn to this line of work. Tilly served in a different time, but the values he believed in were and are timeless. Tilly had a deep and abiding love of Colorado, especially rural Colorado, a love of country, truly, a loyalty to his community over his party, truly, a reverence for our institutions. Tilly believed in our institutions, a respect for our founding principles, a love of the elaborate give and take that animate the checks and balances that make our Republican form of government one of the greatest gifts ever given to men and women on planet Earth. Tilly believed that, and I do too. Tilly wasn't a big and booming brand of leader. Tilly was studious and deliberate instead. In the year I observed him from the back benches as his legislative aide, he didn't speak at the microphone most days. What he did do was work the bills that were important to his constituents aggressively. I'll put it to you this way. Tilly Bishop knew how the School Finance Act worked for every single one of the school districts he represented, and those neighboring school districts too. If Senator Norton or Senator Anderson are in the room today, they are both nodding their head. Tilly represented his people with purpose. Mr. President, Tilly was a man of the Senate. He loved this state capitol. He loved these Senate chambers, and he served here with true distinction. Before him, State Senator Chet Enstrom, himself a lion who roamed the halls of this building. And after Tilly came State Senator Rod Tech, and then me, Josh Penry. I'm proud to have worked for and learned from and served in the lineage of State Senator Tillman Bishop. May God bless his memory. May the light of Tilly's legacy continue to shine on his home team, Western Colorado, USA. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to come up and say a few words about Tilly Bishop. I knew Tilly for many years. He was when I worked for the Colorado Division of Wildlife, he was a great friend from the West Slope over here at the state legislature. And, you know, one of his, I think one of the greatest things he did was the great outdoors while he was over here. And, you know, former Speaker Russ George asked me to say a couple things about Tilly. And he said, Russ said, Tilly Bishop was one of the most consummate, honest, decent, durable, and capable public servants I have ever known. I learned a great deal from him and highly prize my long-term friendship with Tilly and Pat. That's from former Speaker Russ George. You know, and it's been said, and I don't want, you know, he was elected as a Republican from Mesa County, but over here he was a real bipartisan legislator, and this enabled him to get legislation passed. He introduced 736 bills and shepherded 456 of them to the governor's desk while he was here in service. He was a very generous man. I knew him, both he and Pat, fairly well, and it's a great loss, and it's a great loss to Western Colorado and the West Slope in Mesa County. Thank you.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say a few words as well about Senator Tilly Bishop, or also as I knew him, as County Commissioner. He was a very thoughtful, very humble man. You could have some great discussions with him about government, about public service. But I will never forget the first time I met Senator Bishop. And it was the very first time that I testified in a Senate committee. And the person carrying the bill was my state senator, Donna Ment. Had to do with land use, the 35-acre bill. And I get up to testify. Senator Bishop was the chair of the committee. I was a little nervous because it was my first time. And I introduced myself, said who I was, you know, Barb Kirkmeyer, Weld County Commissioner, and he stops me. And I'm thinking, well, now what? He looks at me and goes, you're a county commissioner? And I said, yes, sir, I am. And he goes, huh. He goes, county commissioners don't look. Now, I just want you to know I'm sitting next to Senator Donna Ment. It's his bill. And I'm thinking, great, there went my credibility in this committee. And so I look at Ment, and then I look back at Tilly Bishop, and I said, huh, state senators look like you on my side of the mountain. Because they both had gray hair, and they were a lot older than me. So, and he busted out laughing. And as I was going through the bill, after I got done, I had notes all over it, and I was talking about it. And he goes, I'd like to see your notes. And I was like, I don't think so. And he's like, because I had written like all sorts of things on my paper. And I'm like, no, I don't think you should get to see those. He goes, I'd like to see your notes. Anyways, afterwards, when we got out of committee, we had a great conversation about the bill, and just had a great conversation, and I got to know him at that point. So as a county commissioner, when we served together, and you're right, he did do a lot with GOCO, Great Outdoors Colorado. He was always there for rural Colorado, always there for the Western Slope, great deal about agriculture. He knew a lot about local government, and it just was a really good conversation to have with him and a good time with him. He's a great person. Again, just very thoughtful, very humble, just really one of the good guys. One of those people that you could just have that conversation with. Just one of the good guys, the true definition of a public servant, something that we could all aspire to. Thank you.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend Senate Rule 31A for the purpose of allowing current and former members of the House and former members of the Senate to address the Senate considering this memorial.
This does take a 2/3 majority. You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that motion is adopted. The Senate will now stand in recess to hear remarks from members of the House and former members of the Senate. Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the Senate and guests. I got to know Tilly Bishop late in life. I remember the first time that I met Senator Bishop was in 2003 as a freshman at Mesa State College, now Colorado Mesa University. And I remember it was a luncheon, and as students there, of course, we were in the back, and distinguished either staff or alumni were in the front. And the table I sat at was in the back. And Tilly and his wife came and they sat right beside me at that table in the back. And instantly I recognized Tilly because he was a legend in Western Colorado. We knew who he was. I'd never had the opportunity to meet him until that point. And I remember striking up a conversation, although the first thing I asked him was about his tattoo that he had that was, at this point in life, very faded. And I believe it was from his service in the Navy, but I can't quite remember. And he then went on to talk about his service in the State House and in the State Senate. And I remember one comment that he made that I have never, ever forgotten. And he said he has always been willing to trust the voices of the youth and the next generation because he always found that they were willing to push ideas that those from an older generation might not be willing to try and to test certain boundaries that may have been dismissed earlier. And as a young freshman, that was inspiration. That was the inspiration to become a student leader myself. But that conversation didn't stop there. I saw Tilly. I was a Wayne Aspinall Scholar, and he was on the panel that interviewed me. And unlike any other people on that committee, Tilly wanted to follow up. So he called me up and he said, "Hey, Matt, how are classes going?" And I was always glad to be able to report, well, I have straight A's or mostly straight A's. But then when I went off to the University of Edinburgh, I was away for 4 years, Tilly always sent me an email and a note saying, "Stop by when you're back. I want to hear an update. I want to hear what's going on." He was a true mentor, and he was one who was fully engaged in students. He was fully engaged in mentoring that next generation to be Colorado leaders, and that's something I will never, ever forget that Tilly gave. I remember one of the last times I met with him was in 2018 at his house, and just an amazing conversation. But I did know that it was probably likely to be our last, as his health was not good at that point in time. Just an amazing friend, an amazing mentor, and an amazing public servant to the state of Colorado. Thank you.
Representative Taggart.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be here today, and it's an honor to speak about a friend in Tilly Bishop. I try to serve in his footsteps, and I have some other footsteps here in this room as well because I represent House District 55 and Senator Rich before me, and former Representative Gail Berry as well was House District 55. So hopefully I won't embarrass any of you folks. When I stepped away from my corporate life that I love so dearly, I spent some time with my mom as I returned home to Grand Junction that I love. And she made two requests of me. One was to serve the community that I so dearly loved, and the second was to give back to students what had come to me by way of my education. There were two individuals that I reached out to as I returned to fulfill what my mother had requested. One was Senator Bishop. I had known Tilly for years because I had been commuting back and forth from Grand Junction to Connecticut to Switzerland, and I had gotten to know him. Senator Rich, I think, talked about the fact that we get a phone call once a year, in addition to other phone calls from Senator Bishop having to do with the Lions Club, and the only statement was made is, "Rick, I signed you up for 2 or 3 books. Send me a check." Okay. So when Tilly was willing to give me his time when I arrived back in Grand Junction and coached me on what it would be like to move from my corporate life into public service. He said two things that stuck with me in our very first conversation and conversations thereafter. One, Rick, with your background, know the numbers inside and out. Study them. Know exactly what's going on in the budget. And I took that to heart. And second, legislate on behalf, if you're successful, legislate on behalf of your constituents. Be prepared to reach across the aisle. And hopefully he's proud that I'm doing that today. The other person that I spoke with that is going to come up here and talk, that was equally as important to me as Tilly Bishop and still is very important. I don't know how to refer to him. He's former Representative Tim Foster, President Tim Foster. Without Tim's guidance and Tilly, I would not be in the House. And I will be forever grateful to those two men who gave me so very much time to help me transition from a corporate life into serving a city that I so dearly love. Thank you very much.
If there are any former members who would like to speak, we invite you to the well at this time. Senator Schroeder.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Seems like I've served a lot of people in the last 2 months that I've been down here that we're memorializing. Tilly, I was interesting with Tilly. I came in here in 1987. Tilly had already served in this chamber 12 years. I served 12 years also, so Tilly and I went out as the first term-limited senators from this body, myself and, I think 6 or 7 others. We had our picture taken back up here, and but that was an interesting time, and I heard, really, I think Tilly would have served until he died here, if you want to know the truth. He was part of the institution. Senator Ron Tech, who I know very well, and we're good friends and go down to Grand Junction to see him regularly. And I think you heard, he had surgery a couple days ago, and that's why he's not here, and he wrote that nice letter. And he gives his regrets, as you've heard. But if term limits didn't take place, Ron might not have made it here, I'll tell you. One of the first things Tilly said to me when I came in '87, he said, "This is the way you need to handle your bills. Go up, move them, say maybe one sentence, and stop." And so there for a while, that's, advice. You did a lot of things from those that have been around a long while. And when I came in, the majority of people here probably had 16 to 20 years of service in this body, and because they came from the House to here, and so one thing I discovered with Tilly, he didn't follow his own suggestion. He'd get up here, say a few words, and he'd be here for about 10 minutes. So it was interesting. Tilly and I traveled. We did NCSL, which I heard was said earlier. We traveled to Washington, D.C., and we got on one of those get-on, get-off buses around there, and so we got all through with that, and Tilly said, "Let's give someone a call I know down here and see if she can get us in the White House." So he called this lady named Judy Black. Now, some of you may remember Judy Black. She served in the Reagan administration for 8 years. But her sister was Jane Norton, who was lieutenant governor. They grew up, I think, in the Grand Junction area. Father was a basketball or a coach, baseball coach. But anyway, so he called Judy, and we met Judy, and next thing we know, we're going in the West Wing. And everybody's looking at us like, what are these people doing here? Judy's got her credentials, but we had nothing. And we were in there for about 15 minutes, and finally Tilly and I said, we better get out of here. So we mentioned to Judy, and she says, yeah, let's go. But Judy got us into the Capitol, and Tilly got us in that first part. We also had a chance to meet the Majority Leader of the Senate, Bob Dole. That was set up, and I think Tom Norton did that, but Bishop, I believe, was with us. So I traveled a lot with Tilly in different places, and NCSL and others. But he's just one that got a lot done. We didn't have a limit on bills when I first came here, and some of the members had a lot, and you heard Tilly, he had a lot. Tilly always had a lot, so did a few others, but we then instituted a 5-bill limit, and then you could stretch that out if you got permission from leadership. But Tilly was still able to get several bills, which you've probably heard already. But he was a great legislator, and he was a great one to follow. And I thank you for the opportunity to say something about Tilly.
Representative Foster.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I remember Tilly. I was a kid when he was first elected. And you hear about Tilly being this jovial, sweet guy, and he certainly was that, had a great sense of humor. But Tilly also had a salty side, if you will. I recall that Tilly actually was elected to this body because he primaried Chet Instrom, because Chet was the swing vote to split Western Colorado in half when they did congressional redistricting. And so Tilly took out an incumbent Republican senator because everybody in Western Colorado was so unhappy with him. So Tilly wasn't just always this sweet, nice guy, but certainly, 736 bills, 456 passed, 1 vetoed, established GOCO, Go Colorado, which has obviously benefited the state and very controversial at the time. The duck stamp, he was always very proud of that, which raised money for the Division of Wildlife. Wine bill, ski liability bill, you can tick through those. But Tilly was really, as I think you've gotten some sense, a lot more than that. And I tell you, he had a great sense of humor. When I came in, we came in with a wave of very young, I was 28, and about 4 or 5 other, Bill Jerky, Steve Arviskow, and we thought we were pretty funny. So during the session, we collected garbage bags full of shredded paper, and on the last day, we visited the ceiling above the president's seat and dumped that paper on Tom Norton, which piled high down here on the front desk, and Tom Norton did not think that was very funny. Tilly Bishop did, thank God. So I appreciated that in him. And Tilly had a way of being funny and embarrassing me all the time. We had those name tags that said Representative Foster, Representative what have you, and Tilly introduced me to the Club 20 when they were here and said, well, Representative Foster's new to this body. He has to have his name tag so he remembers his title and his name. I was like, thank you, Tilly. But he had a great sense of humor as well. Ken Klober, who I think was just iconically funny, introduced him once as the poster child for term limits, which Tilly actually chuckled at, which I thought he was going to kill him. But there was really more to Tilly than that, his service here, et cetera. His wife of 67 years, Pat, and it was always Pat and Tilly. Pat was an educator at Central High School for 30 plus years. Tilly, obviously, at Mesa for 31 years. And you think about how many lives they touched. You heard from Representative Soper, and I can tell you just the legions of students and that they were so proud. They could not walk around Grand Junction without somebody coming up and reminding Tilly what he had done for them at the college, or Pat, what she had done for him at Central High School. The muses are the bard's muse. The good is often interred with the bones of those who did good. And I will tell you, I think Tilly and Pat have really rebutted that concept because, in fact, their legacy lives on in terms of their gifts to Western Colorado. One of their gifts allowed CMU to reduce the tuition at Western Colorado Community College, also known as Tilly Tech, by 40%. And you think about the 1,300 students this year that benefited from that reduction. They just made a $100,000 gift from that legacy to the school district that is Mesa County's primary school district. And so their legacy lives on, not just in that regard, but also in the lives that they touched. Regent Bosley wanted me, can't speak today, but he wanted me to make sure that you understood. Tilly also got an honorary degree from the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, his birthplace, and so wanted to make sure that made it into the record. But thank you very much. Always a pleasure to visit the Cave of the Winds, and I will stop there.
Representative Berry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of the many years I have served and worked in this building and been on the Senate floor, this is my first time in the well of the Senate, and it's such an honor to speak to all of you, and especially for this event of the memorial for my good friend Tilly Bishop. Everything you've heard is, I know, true because I have similar stories to all of those. But as I listened to things over the years on memorials, it struck me as a former colleague and I were talking, the challenge you have when you memorialize someone is to talk about them and not myself. Because the reason you're here is your lives are so intertwined with theirs, but you're here to honor what they did and not yourself. So I will make my best attempt at that. I have 3 very strong life lessons that Tilly Bishop was responsible for. And one of those was, interestingly enough, that my first year coming in, my first 2 years in the House, he was serving his final 2 years in the Senate, which you've heard talked about, that were it not for term limits, I am certain he would still be serving with all of you. And he kind of took me under his wing. I went to high school with his son, Barry, that was mentioned. And one day I was talking to Tilly and I said, you know, the life lesson is this is such a beautiful, beautiful building to come to work every day in. And for us all to remember that each and every day we come to work here, regardless of what our work may be today. And Tilly said, yeah. He said, Gail, that's really true. He said, some days you'll be sitting in your seat on the floor in the chamber, and you'll look around and you'll say, wow, what am I doing here? He said, and then there are those other days when you're going to be sitting in your floor on the chamber, in your chair on the floor on the chamber, and you'll look around at all your colleagues and you'll say, what are they doing here? Life lesson number 1 from Tilly about the legislature. He also taught me, and others, one of Tilly's main things, you've heard others speak to this, the way he articulated it was, don't ever make a permanent enemy out of a temporary disagreement. We have so many disagreements under the Gold Dome every day, and he taught me, as he taught others, you have to move on from those, and you have to focus on the things you agree on, and he taught that kinds of statesmanship, which I really admire in Tilly Bishop. And the final thing that many of you have probably heard, we used to hear it a lot, and remember that was a long time ago, but was that your word is your bond. And we all still hear that. We used to hear it constantly. Tilly was a real statesman about that, and he taught me that as well as others that. And certainly the story that can go with that is at one point early in my legislative career, I had been approached to co-sponsor a bill, and the person told me a great deal about the bill, and it sounded like a good bill. So y'all know where this is going. So I agreed to co-sponsor it, and once we saw the introduced bill, not the draft, it was not what had been described. And I was talking to Tilly about it, and he said, did you give your word that you'd co-sponsor it? And I said, yeah, I did. He said, then you're a co-sponsor. I said, yeah, I know. He said, what did you learn from that? I said, I kind of learned maybe sometimes you need to wait a little longer before you give your word. And even if it sounds good, he said, that's exactly right, but you're going to keep your word. I said, I'm going to keep my word. And I think some of those lifelong lessons that Senator Bishop was so good at articulating change over the years. But as I reflected on the comments that I had prepared for today, and I realized, you know, I am talking about Tilly and not myself. And yet, at the same time, as we talk about Tilly, we do all talk about ourselves, but more importantly, about this institution, because he made such a mark on it. His statesmanship lives on in many of the things that you do and the accomplishments he's had. And in talking about him, we indeed are honored to talk about some of ourselves. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Tate, no need to be shy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Senators. A lot's been said about Tilly Bishop. I just offer a couple final thoughts. I came into the legislature with Representative Berry. We were part of the same class when Tilly was finishing his last 2 years in the Senate. And he exemplified what a statesman was. I first met him when my mentor, who unfortunately we'll memorialize in a couple weeks, Senator Tanner, told me to come over to the Senate when I first got elected and introduced me to a few people. And I met Senator Bishop, and he gave similar advice, I think probably to all of us who were new to the body, that it's a bill and there'll be a bunch of them, so don't make permanent enemies over a temporary situation. And it was either he or former member Tony Gramscis who told me something I'll never forget. It's a bill, carry it, don't marry it. And that was really great advice. It was good to watch a statesman at work. And as Tim said, he had a salty side on occasion, but we all have salty sides on occasion, and that's all right. But it's being able to temper it and move forward and get things done for the benefit of the people of the state. And that's what he was so good at. So I'm just pleased to be here. I'm pleased to see that we're memorializing someone who is really just a great guy and very effective for the people of the state of Colorado. Thank you.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I renew my motion for adoption of Senate Joint Memorial 005 and request a roll call vote.
The motion is the adoption of Senate Joint Memorial 5. Will the clerk please poll the members?
Senators Baisley. Baisley, aye. Bridges. Bridges, aye. Buckner. Buckner, aye. Coleman. Coleman, aye. Cutter. Cutter, aye. Danielson. Danielson, aye. Exum. Exum, aye. Fields. Fields, aye. Gardner. Gardner, aye. Janal. Janal, aye. Gonzalez. Gonzalez, aye. Hanson. Hanson, aye. Hinrichsen. Hinrichsen, aye. Jaquez Lewis. Jaquez Lewis, aye. Kirkmeyer. Kirkmeyer, aye. Kolker. Kolker, aye. Liston. Liston, aye. Lundin. Lundin, aye. Marchman. Marchman, aye. Moreno. Moreno, I. Mullica. Mullica, I. Pelton, B. Pelton, B, I. Pelton, R. Pelton, R, I. Priola. Priola, I. Rich. Rich, I. Roberts. Roberts, I. Rodriguez. Rodriguez, I. Simpson, excused. Smallwood. Smallwood, I. Sullivan. Sullivan, I. Van Winkle. Van Winkle, I. Will. Will, I. Winter. Winter, I. Zenzinger. Zenzinger, I. Schroeder. Schroeder, I. Tate. Tate, I. Mr. President.
Aye.
President, I.
With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Joint Memorial 5 is adopted. Co-sponsors, Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request the current roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. The Senate will now observe a moment of silence, and the chimes will be rung in memory of Senator Bishop. The Senate will stand in a brief recess to allow members to greet our guests. The Senate will come back to order. Third reading of bills. Consent calendar. Will the clerk please read the title to the bill on the consent calendar?
Senate Bill 204, Senator Pelton B., Representative Pugliese, concerning the correction of a defective date reference to properly reflect the legislative intent that agricultural equipment that is used in any controlled environment agricultural facility be exempt from the property taxation for only 5 years.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the passage of the one bill on the third reading consent calendar, which consists of Senate Bill 204.
Is there any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of the bill on the third reading of the bill's consent calendar. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 204 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Roberts, Kirkmeyer, Will, Pelton R., Priola, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundin. Minority Leader Lundin. Third reading of bills, final passage. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1025?
House Bill 1025, Representatives Taggart and Michelson-Janae, Senator Rich, concerning extension of charter school applications.
Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 23-1025 for final passage.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1025. Are there any no votes? Senators Danielson, Winter, Cutter, Henriksen, Marchman, Jaquez Lewis, Rodriguez, Sullivan. With a vote of 26 ayes, 8 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1025 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Zenzinger, Janal, Priola, Smallwood, Minority Leader Lundin, Kirkmeyer, Gardner, Liston, Pelton B., Pelton R., Baisley, Will, Van Winkle.
Take it away.
Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1039?
House Bill 1039, Representative Byrd, Senators Rodriguez and Winter, concerning a requirement that electric load-serving entities periodically report about the adequacy of their electric resources and in connection therewith, making an appropriation.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for third reading and final passage, House Bill 1039.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1039. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundin, Smallwood, Rich, Kirkmeyer, Liston, Pelton B., Pelton R., with a vote of 23 ayes, 11 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1039 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Priola, Marchman, Jaquez Lewis, Cutter, Hansen. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar to tomorrow, Thursday, April 6th.
Motion is to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no? The ayes have it, and the balance of the calendar will be laid over until tomorrow. Committee reports.
April 4th, 2023, the Committee on Transportation and Energy, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 187 be amended as follows, and as so amended, be referred to the Committee for the Whole. Favorable recommendation.
Introduction of bills.
Senate Bill 269, Senators Buckner and Rich, Representatives Lukens and Bradfield, concerning creating a bonus payment program to incentivize Colorado preschool providers to participate in the Colorado Universal Preschool Program.
Education.
Senate Bill 270, Senators Roberts and Simpson, Representative McCormick, concerning projects that restore the environmental health of natural stream systems without administration.
Agriculture and Natural Resources. Announcements. Senator Priola.
Morning, Mr. President. Colleagues, today is Colorado Tech Workers Day at the Capitol. The tech industry accounts for 9% of Colorado's employment, over $76 billion in gross state GDP, gross state domestic product, if you will, and 18% of the state's total economic input. 18%, almost 1/5. As chair of the JTC committee, I get to see firsthand the importance of the work that this industry does in our daily lives. The Colorado Tech Association represents over 300 of the top technology companies, organizations, and institutions across the state of Colorado, encompassing a network of 18,000 leaders statewide, many of whom are here this morning. So please join me down in the West Foyer this morning for breakfast burritos and such, and talk to folks from the industry. They are still going to be going until about 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Senator Kolker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an announcement. The Conference Committee for Senate Bill 168 will meet tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. in room 354. The Senate Conference Committee members include myself, Senator Jaquez Lewis, and Senator Gardner.
Senator Jaquez Lewis.
And thank you, Mr. President. We are doing a room swap. That's why my colleague is here, Senator from Denver. On Thursday, Local Government and Housing Committee will be swapping rooms with our State Affairs colleagues. So we will be in the old Supreme Court upon adjournment tomorrow, and the location change will be reflected on the calendar.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, this Thursday, State Veteran Military Affairs will be changing rooms. We'll be cramped in a really tight space, Senate Committee Room 352. This location change will be reflected on the calendar. It's not till tomorrow, but we wanted to make sure it is announced today, so it's reflected in the calendar for tomorrow. Thank you.
Senator Fields.
Good morning, Mr. President, colleagues. Senate and Health and Human Services Committee will be meeting in 15 minutes. We're going to make that 10:45 in Committee Room 357, and we do have 3 bills that we need to hear.
Senator Fields.
Mr. President, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this morning we have some special guests here with us from Global Village Academy. This is the 7th grade class, and some of their administrators are here. I would like for them to please stand for us, please. They're here with their social studies teacher that's teaching history and political science, and please welcome them to the state capitol and the Senate floor. Thank you guys for being here.
Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an announcement. Senate Education Committee will meet today at 1:30 in room 357. We are hearing House Bill 1089, and we have 3 appointments to Fort Lewis College. Thank you.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Agriculture and Natural Resources, we're going to meet at 10:45 upstairs 352 to hear Senate Bill 192, 10:45.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Transportation and Energy will be meeting at 1:30. We are going to hear Senate Bill 62, 200, and 198.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, just a matter of interest this morning concerning things we do here and things that happen across the street at the Carr Judicial Center. I noticed in all the news this morning there's a headline in the Denver Post on a case, Child Sex Abuse Law Faces Constitutional Challenge. Some of you who were here, I think in 2019, will recall that we debated the question of whether or not to provide a 3-year window for prior sex abuse cases to be brought and civil liability. The pro and con are in this article. We debated that here. The Colorado Supreme Court, when some of us say this will be a constitutional issue, that's a real thing. And so watch the case. I am interested to see what the Colorado Supreme Court does with that. The parties include Aurora Public Schools challenging the law that was passed by the General Assembly, a plaintiff saying that surely the General Assembly would not act unconstitutionally. And from there, we look forward to the decision. Thank you.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Transportation and Energy and staff that are listening, I have an update. I apologize. We will be laying over Senate Bill 62 and only doing Senate Bill 200 and Senate Bill 198. So again, for Transportation and Energy, we will lay over Senate Bill 62 and do Senate Bill 200 and 198.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. And what a fine suit you have today, sir. The Senate will tomorrow morning be meeting in the we'll be having an Appropriations Committee meeting tomorrow. Do just want to flag it is on the calendar, which I consider to be like a syllabus. The fact that we announce ahead of time, hey, don't forget to do your homework tomorrow. Don't forget to do your homework tomorrow. The homework is listed. Please refer to it. One change, we will be hearing Senate Bills 27 and 191 at the top of that calendar as requested by the sponsor of those bills. Thank you.
Will the clerk please mark Senator Bridges as absent? Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, the Senate Judiciary Committee will be meeting today at 1:30 in the Old Supreme Court. We will be hearing Senate Bill 89, Senate Bill 194, House Bill 1108, and Senate Bill 172. Due to the Passover holiday, we will be laying over House Bill 1192, and we'll hear it at a later date. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you there. And Mr. President, if I may, if we can start again at 9 a.m. on time for 2 days in a row, I think it would be incredible. Thank you.
I agree, Senator Gonzalez. If people would just be on time tomorrow, it would be really appreciated. Some of us might be a little hungover from all the Manischewitz, but we'll do our best. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seeing no further announcements, I move that the Senate adjourn until tomorrow, Thursday, April 6th at 9 a.m.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will adjourn until 9 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, April 6th.